What is the purpose of life, Naval? Everyone has to have their own answer to this question. So my answer is not necessarily correct. It's just valid for me. It's not valid for you. So what's interesting is more to explore the question than to try and come up with an answer to the question. Kapil Gupta and I've talked quite a bit about this, and the conclusion that I've sort of come to for myself is, I'm not answering your question directly, I'm answering a little indirectly, is when I try to think about what I want to do these days with my life, and I'll be the first to admit that I have a luxury that the rest of you don't, or many of you don't, which is I have money. So I have a lot more options open to me. But I like to think that I would have still thought this way even if I didn't have money, which is, when I think about what I should do with my life, I kind of realize that none of it is going to matter in the end. In fact, one good mental construct, if everyone could stop with the questions for a sec, one good mental construct is that I think that everything I do in my life is going to be a failure. Everything I do is going to be a failure. And I'm being deliberately provocative because I'm trying to catch your attention to deeply think about this. The reason everything I do is going to be a failure is, one is on the material level, on the physical level, I'm going to die. And when I die, I won't care. I've been under general anesthesia. There was life before. What was life like before I was born? I just didn't care. In those situations, you don't care. So when you die, you don't care about anything anymore. So in that sense, everything you've accomplished, you don't take anything with you. It's a failure. There's a second sense in which it's all guaranteed to fail, which is, even if you believe in ideas and memes and progeny and legacy, well, eventually the Earth will fade away. And after that, the solar system will fade away. And after that, the galaxy will fade away. And then the universe will end. So nothing is forever. Nothing is permanent. So everything goes to zero eventually. So there's that sense of failure. And there's a third way of realizing that everything you do is destined to fail, which is just look at your own experience. Every time you do anything and you succeed, you're really happy about it. And then a year later, you're back to where you started. Sometimes even a day later, but best case a year later, you're mentally back to where you started. The same way, if you fail to do something or something goes poorly for you, you're miserable and unhappy, but within a few months or a year, you're back to your previous state mentally. So even when you succeed, you bank that success right away and you essentially fail. So everything I do in my life is guaranteed to fail. So now what should I do with my life? And the answer is only what I really want to do for its own sake. And that's the definition of art. So whether it's business, whether it's exercise, whether it's romance, whether it's friendship, whatever you're doing, I think the meaning of life is to do it for its own sake. It's to just do it because you love living it. There is no meaning beyond that. And ironically, when you do things for their own sake, that's when you create your best work. That's when it's art. That's when it's, that's when you create that's when you're gonna do your finest work. And so even if you're trying to make money, you'll actually be the most successful. The year in which I sort of generated the most wealth for myself, even though it hasn't paid out yet, I can tell just in terms of I accomplished the most, I created the most value on an economic basis, was actually also the year in which I worked the least hard. But it was the year in which I cared the least about the future. It's where I was mostly just doing things for the sheer fun of it, where I was basically telling people I'm retired, I'm not working, and then I had the time to put into whatever was highest value in front of me, and by doing it for its own sake, I did it at its best. So I don't know if that answers your questions about meaning of life, but that is one way in which I think about it. There are other frames that I use. There's probably about 10 different frames that I'm using at all times to think about my life, but that is a recent and powerful one.
Maybe you think, no, life isn't that hard. It's like, not only is it that hard, it's even harder than you think. So you're going to be tested, that's for sure. And if you have a sustaining meaning, then well, Nietzsche said himself, he who has a why can bear any how. Why would you look in the darkest places? Because in the darkest places you can find what still shines. If it can shine in the darkest places, then you know it's a real light. And so you look at the things you don't want to look at. You have to look at the things you don't want to look at. Well, why do meaningful things? Well, first of all, what is meaning? But then why do meaningful things? And the answer is, well, because life is suffering and malevolence. It's ineradicable at its core. It's like, that will take you out. Make no mistake about it. You need you need to be armed with virtue in order for that not to turn into hell. Really, you really need that.
Ubuntu is another Polynesian word I wanted to share with you. If you find your why, you will always find your how. Ubuntu is your reason for being. The bigger the why, the more powerful the how. If there is no consequence to your why, you will not have good solutions. If your why is extraordinarily large, you will be more creative than any problem can overwhelm.
So let me give you a thought experiment. There aren't too many of us who would run into a burning building for a few $100s. Some of you may run into a burning building for $1 million. If you have children and your children are in that building and it requires you to put yourself at risk in order to save their souls, most of us would run without hesitation into that building. When you understand your why, you will find your how. It's understand the contextualization and your source of strength. The difference between struggle and suffering is meaning. If you have profound meaning in it, it's just a struggle. You will power through. If it has no meaning, you will suffer. And often you will break